Hey, this is Marlon from marlonmcpherson.com. Welcome back to another video in the series, Podcasting for Your Business. My goal is to get you started with your own podcast for your business or brand so you can grow your audience, drive more traffic to your website, and get more leads. So I've done a few videos already that talks you through the strategy behind it, show you some equipment in terms of recording for your microphone, the software, and some other options. And we've looked at distributing the podcast as well to the various podcasting apps and platforms that you can listen on. So in this video, what I'm going to do is touch on the branding for your podcast. Now, branding is really important for your podcast because it is what's going to help you stand out and get people to click on your podcast. You want to get them interested so they can have a go at actually listening and pick you out from amongst the crowd, because there are thousands of podcasts available on these multiple platforms that you can listen on, right? There's a sea of podcasts out there. People need to make a split-second decision about what they want to listen to. Now, if you're in a genre that's not very competitive, chances are you might not have that many podcasts. It might be a handful, if that. You stand a much better chance of actually standing out without putting too much effort into branding. But even then, branding is still important because there are so many more benefits to tie everything in into the minds of people as to what the quality of what you do is all about. Because if you take pride in the branding, chances are you're going to take pride in whatever else you offer to them as well. But other than that, it needs to be something that reflects the overall strategy, brand strategy for your business. So branding in terms of the podcast can be kind of like a micro brand of your main brand, or it could be just part of your main brand as normal. And we're looking at Apple Podcasts at the moment. So this is the app on my computer. And as I go through, you can see that there are various images here. And they're all very interesting images. And what we're trying to do here with the podcast images is basically we need to draw the attention of the potential listener so they can look. It comes from the advertising world. Visuals are important. So we're talking about two aspects here when we talk about the branding, right? We're talking about not just visuals, but we're talking about the messaging as well. So the visual branding and the messaging. And it can even extend beyond the visual to the actual listening elements as well. So what you hear. So the main thing here is in terms of the visual, as you can see, we're talking about the thumbnail or the cover art. So these are more accurately referred to as cover art. It's kind of like how you have a CD cover or an album cover for music, and you want to make it as interesting as possible, but you want it to be in keeping with your brand or the theme of the podcast, if the podcast is going to be its own sort of micro brand, right? And the idea is to understand who your listeners are and directly put things in your cover art to attract that type of listener. Now, there's a few different ways you can get cover art or artwork done for your brand or for your podcast cover image. There are DIY options as usual, and there's the custom route. So if you want to say get some special custom graphic done, like using an illustrator, for example, to come in and do that, obviously you're going to spend more money doing that. It could cost a few hundreds to even thousands, depending on the type of work and who it is, and the level of experience the person has. But if you don't want to spend a lot of money, there are some options that you can use. So Canva is a really popular online photo editing or graphic design or graphic editing tool. So you can find them at canva.com. They have a free plan and they have paid plans. So you can basically utilize the templates that they have available to create different types of digital graphics. So you can actually download those once you've designed them, put your elements in. You can download those and use them. So you can do artwork here for your podcast as well. I don't particularly use Canva. I'm going to show you the one that I tend to use if I use a tool like this, and it's called Glorify. Glorify is, let me just come out of this here. So Glorify, you'll find them at glorify.com. and they are basically like Canva, but they are a fully paid tool. You can try them out for 14 days on a trial, and basically after that you have to pay for the service. But they have some really nice templates, and they have some really classy designs already to go, and you can just plug your image in or plug whatever you need, your text, and get going quickly. And you can find them here, like I said, and try them out. And this is what I use. Now, obviously, if you don't want to use an off-the-shelf sort of solution like this, which I think is a good choice, a good option to be able to use this. If you want something more custom and you're able to design something for yourself, there are tools like Photoshop, there are tools like Adobe Illustrator, but I use Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo. So it's basically the equivalent of Photoshop and Illustrator, but from a company called Serif. And these guys here make it easy for you to create designs, nice designs. It's pretty much the same sort of functionality like any other professional tool that you may use to design in. Okay, so that covers the visual aspects of it. One thing I might want to mention is that it's not just about the cover image, but also if you want to have let's say social media graphics or any other special graphics that you want to use to basically show to be able to promote the podcast and to put it on other places like websites and things like that. You want to have special banners and graphics created for it as well. That's something that you might want to look at doing there as well. So the next aspect here of your podcast branding is the messaging, which is really important. And this is really how you want your podcast to come across and the value proposition that you're going to provide essentially to people. And this is going to come down to your main title of the podcast, so the name of the podcast, and the description of the podcast. So what it's about, why people should actually listen to this, and is it for them? So you want to make sure you nail that. You can see that there are branded names and there are actual descriptive names as well, depending on the podcast. Mine is Future Steps Creative. It has the name creative in it, and it's not that specific, but it's about helping people to create and grow online businesses and grow their audience that way. So in a way, it's kind of like related in terms of the name, but it's not super specific. Like if I was to call it How to Create a Podcast, or the Marketing Podcast, that's what it's about. So this can help with SEO, and it helps to cement in the mind of people. So naming strategy is a totally different subject onto itself that we can't get into right now, but you should ultimately decide on your naming based on how you want things to come across and how that ties in with a wider brand. The description obviously should say exactly what the podcast is about, though, because that's what people are going to want to kind of pay attention to know if it's for them or not. And obviously, if you don't have the description, if you don't have a descriptive name, then obviously nailing that description segment there is going to tell the podcast platform what your podcast is about. Therefore, it will show up, hopefully, when people type in this type of podcast or whatever type of podcast it is. So getting this done, you can obviously either write your own description, which is pretty straightforward. But if you struggle with copywriting and things like that, you could work with a copywriter as well to get this done. Now, there's another thing that you might want to consider doing, and that is music, as well as a specially recorded intro and outro. This also can lend itself to branding because it is something that people can identify easily and associate with your particular podcast or with your brand, because they hear it over and over. If they hear a particular music or a particular style of music, they can associate that. And this is a way to actually make your brand memorable. So with an intro or an outro, what you could do is take your USP, your unique selling point, and actually put your stamp on how you want to present that in an interesting way, but make it short and concise so you can say it in a few seconds. and record that basically, so you don't have to necessarily say it every single time you do a podcast episode. You could either insert that in post when you're editing, or if it's a live mix board setup that you have that you can play it back, then you just insert that live. It just depends. It's a little bit more technical, but this is something that is possible. If not, you could do an outro where you do at the end of the podcast episode, it just plays through what the podcast is about and what you'd like people to do. So their next steps. And you could either record this yourself, or you could use like a voiceover artist. You could hire a voiceover artist to make it a little bit more different and get it done that way. So these are the options that I have here to brand your podcast. These are the standard things that you would want to do. And obviously, the more you can make your podcast stand out, then the more likely you're going to get that new listener. Just showing you an example here of this podcast, a plant-based podcast. And you can see their graphic there. They've had custom illustration done. Okay, so the description, they've got quite a bit in here that explains what the podcast is about. So this is something that you could have one paragraph, or the more you have, the better, because people would actually hopefully read that if they want to decide for themselves if they're going to give you a listen. And pretty much that's it. So that's it for the videos for now within the series. I will be doing some more practical tutorials and so on. But if you do need ongoing help and guidance, you can head over to futurestepscreative.com, which is my online community. You can ask questions in the forum. I'll be going in there and helping you out by answering whatever I can. Other people might be in there that's able to help you as well. But in addition to that, you have my online courses and trainings that you can gain access to help you build or grow your online business. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.